Anyway.
Start that over. So hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for coming out tonight for this class with Steve Clorfeine. We're very happy to have him here, especially since he will be heading out on a 2-month trip to teach abroad. So we're really excited and grateful that you made the time to be here with us this evening, so close to your trip. And Steve, for those who are not familiar with him, has been a student of meditation for the past 40 years with Shambhala, from the Shambhala Buddhist tradition. He teaches classes in meditation and mindfulness and awareness practice. In addition, he leads retreats using both meditation and arts practices. He is a writer, director, and teacher who leads improvisational theater workshops as well in the United States, Europe, and Asia. His workshops are full of surprise, humor, and engagement. These forms of practice are referred to as deep play because they draw people closer to their creative strengths and awaken a sense of well-being. So with that, I would ask that you help me welcome Steve to our class this evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Phoenix. It's always nice to hear someone else say things about you that you didn't even say about yourself. Someone else said them, and then they're being repeated by someone, yet someone else. So there's a lot that could be said about meditation, and I'm sure that most of you have had, if not direct experience of meditation practice, at least a sense of what meditation is, or what contemplation or meditative mind, you could say, is. So I thought I would like to start, and a lot of what we're going to do together this evening is experiential. So I'm going to try not to go off on too many of the many tangents that we could really include in this conversation. But there are so many conversations that could be had about meditation and about meditation experience. Something like, sort of like waves overlapping when they come in. You see one and feel one, and then there's the next one and it's slightly different and you have a slightly different feeling about it. I think it's that, I feel that way about meditation, that the more you begin to get in that, the modality of talking about it and thinking about it, the more there is about it that you want to talk about and think about and investigate. And so at the beginning, I'd like to say that for me, and both in the tradition that I was trained in, but also the many traditions that meditation is drawn from, one fundamental element is the opportunity to bring oneself closer to oneself. And that's where I think meditation begins, as a tremendously universal truth that human beings want to be drawn closer to themselves. They want to be, we want to be in contact with our true nature, with our beingness, with our essence, with who we are anyway. We struggle from the time we're conscious of being seen by the world with a kind of sense of, well, am I who I am, or am I who other people look at me and say I am, or who I look out and say I should be like? So the first quality of meditation practice is this opportunity to spend time with yourself and to relax into the luxury of having that time to look at who you are, how you feel, and also at this point, I would say fundamentally, without looking for any changes or results, but just a basic neutral consideration and investigation of this moment, not what we want next month, or it's always this time of years with New Year's resolutions floating around. One always has this sense of it's going to be different this year, or I want this to change this year. And that's certainly somewhere in the echo of meditation practice, but the actual practice of it, the participation in it, is almost releasing that echo into just being present and what it feels like to be present. So one of my favorite meditation teachers is a Zen teacher named Suzuki Roshi. And he was one of the early meditation teachers, Buddhist meditation teachers, to come to America and teach in America. And he taught in the late 1960s and early 70s and founded a whole stream of meditation centers. And he, in a wonderful little book of talks, and his talks were very short, in the first chapter of his book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, he said, body and mind are not one and not two. And he went on to say that they are both one and both two. And so that's a little, it could start to sound enigmatic, but I'd like to begin by just exploring that a little bit, this sense of body and mind. What's our experience of body and mind? This is a tremendous stream of teachings that not only occurs in meditation, but also occurs in the contemporary movement studies world and the contemporary psychology world and the contemporary neurological world. What is mind and what is body? And what is not one and not two about mind and body? Because it can get very easily tricky if we try to analyze it too much and say, well, is this my mind, is this my body? When you can't really separate them, but at the same time, mind seems to have one kind of function, body seems to have another kind of function, but mind is in body, and body is we're only aware of body because of mind. It's not body that says, I'm aware of body. It's mind that says, I'm aware of body. It's mind that says, I feel the coldness of my fingertips. It's not the fingertips talking, although I think we'd like them to be talking in that way a lot of the time, for example. It's not, your watery eyes or, the blush on your face that's saying, this is the way I am. It's what you know about conditions in the world that's acknowledging that that's how things are, that's how things happen to your body. So there's this wonderful dance of mind and body. And I think I'd like to just begin by exploring that a little bit and then having a little conversation about what your findings of the moment are about your mind and body. So the way I'd like to do it is just first sitting here as we are, to just feel, great. I didn't see, it's fabulous. I didn't say anything and everybody just did something. It's so great. That's the part of this that we call innate. It's there. We all know what to do. Okay. So what we've done is we've sat up. It's great. We just sat up just like that. And what happened when we sat up? I would say, looking around the room, that something perked up. So there's body giving mind a cue to be other than what it was before. Not better or worse, just other, right? Because we definitely don't want to put conditions on this at all, that one thing is better than another. One thing might feel better than another, but ultimately it's not necessarily better than another, because then we'd be looking for something to be better all the time, which would be contradictory from just being with what's here. Anyway, good. So from where we are, just feel a sense of touch, the touching of your hands against your thigh or knees or wherever they are. Fingertips and palms. And then just move up the arms a little bit and feel what it feels like to have the sense of moving up your arms and having a sensation of what your arms and armpits and shoulders feel like. What your backside feels like on the cushion of this folding chair. What your bundled up feet feel like in their hopefully warm socks and warm shoes, but some sense of the floor underneath you. And notice that when you bring your attention to how things feel in different parts of your body, I mean, we could go through about 50 or 150 other parts of the body in terms of sensation, but let's just stay with this for right now. Notice how you feel about yourself, about being in the room. And when I say notice, it's not looking for anything specific, but just a sense of things. A real sense of things. And if you could, for a moment, bring that same kind of mind-body attention to the back, to your back. And you could start easily by the small of your back against the chair, or the middle of, I don't know, my middle back isn't getting too much against the chair, these chairs, but some other chairs might be giving you more of a sense of middle back. But even imaginatively, the space behind you, that your back is facing space behind you. So we're not all frontal, we're not only receiving information and energy from in front of us, but whether we know it or not, we're receiving energy from the back also. And then we could do the same thing with both sides of the body. Does it have a different quality when we open up to the sides of the body? Can we sustain even lightly and for a moment a sense of the front of the body and the back of the body and the sides of the body, even imaginatively? Imagine that we're in contact with those four directions and those four sides of the body. And then take another step into including the original contact that different parts of your body made and are making with different elements. The feet with the floor, the hands with the thighs, clothing against skin, even imaginatively air against the face. And again, just as a little investigation. What does it feel like? Good. So just relax from that gently. Don't snap out of it into something else, but just relax that little bit of concentration. There's a little bit of focus there. And maybe we could whoever would like could say something about what your experience was, what you experienced in a simple way, and don't be afraid to say something that seems really simple, because often that's all there is really simple. Grounded. And what does that mean?
Just everything else is forgotten for a little while. Just feel, grounded was like the big word.
Yeah, good. So something went down, ground into the ground. Something that might have been floating a little bit went down into the ground. Okay. And what did that? Did you have a feeling about that?
I'm going to say calmness.
Okay. What else? People. Yeah.
I felt awareness in my consciousness that wasn't my consciousness.
And what was it aware of?
My body.
Okay. And what did that feel like for you?
Felt full.
Okay. What else? It's kind of like research. You know, we're gathering pieces of research from having done an experiment. Think of it that way. So we had some sense of groundedness, and there was a feeling of calm. We had a sense of fullness, and that had to do with body. Or sometimes we say embodied, which means we meet our body in a way that we haven't met it a moment before, right? What else?
I was very aware of just sensation in my body, you know. It was really interesting to be focusing in that way, and could actually feel changes in how my skin felt at different parts of my arm, and where I'm holding tension in my back, and
Right.
And the most intriguing piece was when you brought in the 4 directions. I'd never thought of my body as having the 4 directions, or 6, depending on what.
6, I usually talk about, yeah.
6
yeah.
directions,
yeah.
and it was really wonderful to make that connection. And when you had asked us about if we could focus in and bring that awareness in, it was like a full circle of warmth, and I just became very aware of
Warmth.
all the way around. And it was like, that was really great. So thank you.
So having a sense of directions of the body, sides of the body, brought a sense of warmth.
Yeah, and just feeling a complete circuit. It just felt like a nice circle going
Yeah.
around me.
Thank you.
You know, I felt my aches and pains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You ignore them, but let
Yeah.
them more.
Sure. Yeah. That's part of being grounded.
When you actually mentioned what was behind me, and that, in a sense, my mind was seeing behind me, I thought about the memory of what was behind me. Because I'm not able to look
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting how accessible expanding ourselves is to us. And at the same time, I think it certainly reminds me of how often I'm so frontal and I'm just like, want the next thing, or I'm focused on the next thing. And, there's nothing wrong with that. It's completely natural. It's completely human to be focused on the next thing. But one of the issues about that is we so easily forget that we're four-sided, six-sided, that we're full, that we're warm, that we're grounded, because this tends to take us off ground, off balance. So one of the first things that I learned about meditation that made sense to me was synchronizing body and mind. And my teacher, my root teacher, Chögyam Trungpa, spoke a lot throughout the 70s and 80s, throughout his life in the West, about synchronizing body and mind. And it has a lot of reflective language and study in, again, the world of movement studies and neurological studies, this synchronizing of body and mind. And so I think in the next step that we're going to look into in meditation practice, I'd like to just explore a little bit what that might mean, synchronizing body and mind. Because again, there's a little trap. As soon as we say a word like synchronizing, it's like we think we're supposed to be perfect. We think we're supposed to be synchronized. But actually, the moment we sense that we're not synchronized, in a relative way, we're immediately synchronized. Now, I don't mean to sound tricky about that, so let's see if we can be clear about that. I'll say it again, and please give me some feedback about that. What I said was, there can be a little trap when you use a word like synchronized, because immediately we all want to be synchronized in the same way that someone might say integrated. We all want to be integrated, What I'm reflecting on here is, my experience is that noticing that I'm not synchronized has an immediate sense of relative synchronized, because I'm synchronized with where I am. And I'm not judging synchronized, not synchronized, on balance, off balance. I often teach these exercises about balance. And I said, there's no real point about balance. It's all about off balance. And that as soon as you notice you're off balance, it's very interesting. As soon as I notice I'm off balance, well, if I go like that, I've missed the whole thing. Because what's happening here is, this is very interesting. I can tell that in about 30 seconds, this is going to start to ache. I can tell that my voice is changing. It's choking a little bit from being here. So there's a lot of investigative and interesting personal work that we have the opportunity to do when we feel out of balance or unsynchronized. And so when I say relatively synchronized or relatively balanced, it's being in that place of being willing to look at that and what that feels like. And as soon as we bring feeling, attention to it, there's a kind of synchronization and balance that occurs. So can I just invite you to say something about that?
I'll say something, because I don't know what it triggered, but I realized that I didn't turn my cell phone off, and everything's so synchronized. I gotta go start that off because it's gonna ruin everything. So I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
That's
great. That's actually terrific, because that's a perfect kind of example of body and mind. The mind is like stressed because suddenly it realized that something hasn't happened that should happen, and so the groundedness is going, what happened to my groundedness? Now this is happening to us 1,000 times a day. So it's great that that came up, because we're going to talk a little bit more about that. What else about synchronized? I mean, or being in balances? Does it make sense? Does it kind of? Are you going?
When I hear synchronization in meditation, I think of communication between mind and body,
Mm-hmm.
and I think of a juggle of communication and listening, as if you're talking to your body while you're listening to your body.
Mm.
Your body's talking to you while your body's listening to your mind. Makes sense.
So synchronization relating to communication within yourself about what you're sensing in yourself.
And trying to find the harmony in the synchronization, not perfect state,
Right.
but whatever the harmony can be for yourself.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Anything else in this part of the conversation?
I think when I think about synchronization and feel into synchronization of body and mind, I find that the locus of my mind changes, that it in fact drops a little. That I'm less, my mind feels less up here than it does a little moving down into my body.
Mm-hmm. So that's very similar to what you were saying about grounding, that something drops down.
Yeah, I get to be aware of how my mind is moving so fast ahead of me so much of the time. So when you said the word, even the word synchronize, I can almost hear a click
Uh-huh.
internally, like of just bringing these pieces together, like, can we work together here?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's slowing it down, and like you were saying, just dropping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing everybody saying is pointing back to what we were talking about at the beginning in terms of getting closer to yourself, reducing the speed and of daily life, normal daily life, the speed of the mental activity of being 21st century Western human beings. So we've got this, it's sort of like, the new car model every year. Everything gets faster and better and brighter and stronger and more powerful and more expensive. And we have a lot of that's naturally in ourselves, that we want to be better and brighter and richer and, faster and smarter and, more recognized and so on and so forth. So I think in a very simple and almost simplistic way, that meditation practice is about and connected to giving ourselves this opportunity to slow down. And it's not in the name of never re-entering our speedy life. It's just in bringing some balance. This image that people are talking about dropping down, letting things drop down into the body, being more aware of the body, feeling grounded in that way. And what's happened? We're not doing anything particularly. We're just bringing some attention to sitting on a chair and being in a room. We didn't have to go to the gym to do this. We didn't have to take 10 lessons or read books. We had this all inside of us already, and in a sense, we're just responding to what we already know. And then the further step in the meditation practice would be getting familiar with what it's like to sit upright and have a certain kind of posture and connection to your body, and how that might be different at any given time. So it's very important, I think, in meditation practice that we don't come into it with the conception that it's going to be the same every time we approach it, or that even the approach to it is going to be the same. For example, that it would be very disappointing if one began to meditate and on the second time we were going to meditate, we started to feel, I don't want to do this, and then we forced ourselves to do it, and then suddenly it's become another thing, like so many things in our life, like, don't eat that brownie, or don't buy those shoes, they're too tight, and that kind of struggle, without knowing that there's struggle there. So if we begin in terms of practicing meditation, knowing about meditation, being interested in meditation, with the premise that we change from moment to moment, and in the same way, everything around us changes from moment to moment. So you didn't know that you could imagine the door behind you. And when you imagined the door behind you, something shifted. When you imagined there were 4 or 6 directions, something shifted. And those changes, those shifts, won't be consistent. They won't be reliable. The only thing that will be reliable is my mind and body sitting in a certain position and the intention to pay attention to that. That will be consistent. The attention won't be consistent. The attention itself won't be necessarily consistent. One day it'll be, I can't get away from that conversation I just had. I can't get that song out of my head. And another day it'll be, wow, just feels really good to sink down into something. So this is where the word practice comes in. Because there's no meditation without practice. And it doesn't have to be this formal this particular meditation practice. It could be any practice that's contemplative or meditative. But because we're here, we're working with this particular meditation practice, which I'd like to explore a little bit further. So, traditionally, the first thing that we're relating to in meditation practice is posture, how we sit. And we extended that a little bit into how we felt how we sit, how we felt when we were sitting, how things felt when we were sitting. So there's a kind of encouragement to settle. Settle what? I'm not going to say, because it's so personal and it's so different from time to time what one might be settling. It might be not even tangible to our intelligence, what we're settling. It might be simply, it happens so unconsciously in the body that it would be the body saying, hey, I'm settled, and then the mind would be relating in another kind of way. And then we're back to that very interesting investigation about not two and not one, and both two and both one and both two. So the first traditional meditation instruction is about posture. So why don't we go to that again in the same way, like everybody did without my saying anything, and just find a position where you can really feel your connection, the connection of your legs and feet with the floor. You might want to shift around and just feel that you feel your sits bones, the bottom of yourself connected to the seat of the chair, and the small of your back, maybe slightly touching the back of the chair, maybe not. And your hands placed on your thighs or wherever they land. And I'm going to add a few things now. If you open your mouth just slightly with the intention of letting your jaw and the whole cavity of your lower face sink down a little bit. And you let the corners of your eyes relax, and whatever the phrase, soften the gaze, whatever that means to you. Maybe better to say, let your gaze soften. See if your gaze softens with the phrase, let your gaze soften. And imagine that the top of your head has a relationship to the ceiling. So that would be our plugging in and arranging ourselves, arranging our posture, just feeling again what it is to be myself at this moment on a Friday evening in this very quiet room. What does it feel like to just be me here? And from here we could begin to notice our breathing, how it is. How does the breath feel moving in, inhalation, and moving out, exhalation? How does it feel? Am I content with the way my breath is moving? Do I feel like I want to take a deep breath so I can feel it more? What happens if I do that? Can I feel the air moving into and out of my nostrils and into and out of my mouth? Could I imagine that the breath is moving in my body? That I'm breathing, but in some sense I'm also being breathed? So that's the second part of the meditation instruction, is coming into relationship with one's breathing, just how it is naturally at this moment, not trying to change it in any way. And then just begin to notice what it's like to follow the breath, to have a sense of contact with the movement of the breath in and out. And let's recall that there's a space in back of us. And there's the two sides of our body. And the front. And the ceiling above and the floor below. And whatever the renewal of contact feels like, the renewal of contact with the feet on the floor, with hands on the thigh, with clothing against the skin, with muscles of the face. And just feel the breath moving in and out, complete cycle. So we'll continue this investigation for about another minute. Okay, so just as we did before, just sort of relax the intention of that investigation and see what you want, see what your body wants to do. See if a leg wants to move or we're going to talk about this. So let's talk about this. What was that like? What was that?
Scaring me.
Scaring you.
I was going to be hypnotized and fall asleep when it was that close.
What would you do if you were actually really scared that you were going to be hypnotized?
The real fear of being hypnotized wasn't there. It was like I can't. I'm gonna fall off the chair.
Well, what happened? Tired? Is that what happened?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Good.
So, wow.
And what did that? How did that affect your body?
It was really relaxing.
It was relaxing, and so anything else? Good. I love the nonverbal. It's just there was, I don't know if anyone read this article in the Times, New York Times, some days ago. It was about this reference to the person who invented sort of lie detection in detective work and interrogation work, and so they were having there was quite a conversation about that, discussion about that in the article, and to me the most interesting thing that was said was that the conclusion that was drawn by everyone who had done this practice of lie detection and investigating said that one knew a lot more from watching a person's body than hearing the words. So this kind of, you're telling us a lot, and you're telling yourself a lot. Well, I don't mean to scare you by that.
Tell you.
Well, Well, maybe someone else would say something about that.
I've noticed that my part of my mind, some people call your ego, was telling me that there were other things I needed to worry about, other things I needed to think about that were more important than what was going on right then in the moment. And the moment wasn't that important, which I knew was a lie.
Maybe yes, maybe no. I think you're hitting on something really pertinent to this whole thing. This whole practice of contemplation, meditation, investigation into one's being, into one's being present, is it a lie that we're distracted, or is that just what is happening? I'm just posing that as a question, and maybe we'll say a little bit more about that. But to me, that's a pivotal inquiry in meditation practice. Are my thoughts a lie, or are they just my thoughts? Are they the truth, or are they just my thoughts? And maybe I should leave out the word just. Are they a lie, or are they my thoughts? Are they the truth, or are they my thoughts?
There's a great bumper sticker around your Paltz that says, "Don't believe everything you think." Which seems to be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's interesting when the one we just did, I closed my eyes, just instinctively closed my eyes. I didn't the first time. And it was certainly a different experience because I was less aware of light and everything else, so it allowed me to focus more. It was interesting though, when I was concentrating on my breath, I had to yawn. So I went from feeling like this pathway of air coming in and out to basically yawning, which engulfing large amounts of air and kind of releasing that. And that was kind of sudden. It definitely changed everything that was going on at that point. With like a larger focus on that, you know what I mean? If you're focusing on one particular thing, you're focusing on the breathing and the pathways, and then suddenly that widens up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an explosion of that particular thing.
Yeah.
It's almost startling.
Yeah, I think there's a parallel between those two experiences. You're there, you're focusing, you're following the breath, and then suddenly something pops in that, creates a different condition at that moment.
Well, it's interesting, that idea of distracting, I almost teach that idea of distracting when I work with kids or whatever, when they're dealing with addictions or issues. Sometimes you just a lot of times, to try to help get through a certain thing, you try to distract yourself by keeping yourself busy with other things.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not drawn to doing a negative behavior or a negative thing. So it's interesting to not do that,
Mm-hmm.
and to not go in that direction.
Well, or just to be aware that there's a tendency to go in that direction.
Right.
I think so this is really bringing us to a point that I wanted to bring in here, which is around the word familiar and becoming familiar. Because the word practice itself in this context wouldn't make a lot of sense to me if it wasn't connected to becoming familiar. And so what we're becoming familiar with is interruptions, distractions, lies, questions of lie and truth, questions of being so relaxed that we're afraid we're going to go to sleep or be hypnotized, that whatever comes up, what we're ultimately doing in that moment is developing a familiarity with it, just by noticing it. And I would say, and please give some feedback on this, that there's something friendly about what's familiar. It's why we all like to be home once in a while, and why we all like to see people we love once in a while, and we all like to wear clothes that are well worn and well fitted and well suited. So there's something friendly about being familiar. And I think that's one of the pathways in meditation practice, is becoming familiar with the way our mind and body move And sometimes they seem to be moving in completely different directions. I think about this and like the example I was giving before, about being off balance. My mind goes there and my body goes there. And is that, so that part of the investigation is there anything wrong with that? Or by by noticing that, am I furthering and developing my familiarity with what my tendencies are as a human being? What my tendencies are as a person who's, grown up in the world, in a culture for, X number of decades, and hasn't, noticed everything and will not have noticed everything in this whole lifetime necessarily. But what can I do with that? How can I relate to that? Well, that's a very fundamental part of the meditation practice, is taking some pleasure in that familiarity. Oh, I recognize that thought that says, is this a lie? And so it's not, at that moment, recognizing that that's a thought I've had before. Don't believe everything you think. It's a thought. I've had it before, I'll probably have it again. I'm becoming familiar with it, with its texture, with its context, with its content, and so on. So that's very much what the practice of meditation is, becoming familiar with our thoughts, the tendencies towards thought, the tendencies of thoughts that we have, that we conjure up, that we hold in ourselves, that we repeat to ourselves. And the same thing with body, like the tendency to, if you don't mind, the tendency to sit in a certain way, For example, I've been working with a physical therapist because I have this injury. And since I've been working with him, I've actually stopped, you'll excuse me over there too, I've stopped crossing my legs. I never cross my leg anymore. And if I start to do it, I've just learned to undo it, just like that. Because he's shown me with the skeleton of my bones and my structure that it's not working for me. It's not helping me repair the connection between these two big bones in my body that have gone off. So that's really part of becoming familiar. We have so many habits that we don't even notice, and we really don't like them to be pointed out either. Like if someone says, I notice you're always twirling your hair or something like that. We go, oh God, it's like, feels like what do you call it? An intrusion, like a personal intrusion. But this is part of that being with oneself. We're inviting ourselves to notice what our habits are, so we can become more familiar, so we can be more relaxed around them, and not be saying, I need to change this, I should change that. I shouldn't be going with the lie. I know it's a lie, Is this making sense? This aspect of becoming familiar and the friendliness around that. Sometimes I think and I hear teachers say that it's the most friendly thing we could do. And my teacher said over and over again, please do not be afraid to be yourself. And I think that's one of the seeds of being familiar and developing friendliness through familiarity, not being afraid to be yourself. So, for example, a friend came over for dinner, and we were standing around drinking wine, and I noticed that her shirt was a little bit wet here, and she kept looking at it, and she had dripped some wine on her shirt, and it was so poignant to me, because she kept looking at it, and then finally she just buttoned up her shirt. It was just too much to bear. I felt so moved by that, because I thought of all the things that one does to cover things up because it's somehow it's not right. It doesn't feel right, and something as tiny as that becomes such a big thing in a way. I mean, it would. If I was, one of the fears of people, who give talks and give performances are things like their zipper is going to be open, or they're going to drool or something like that. All of that is I know I'm getting a little out there with this, but all of that is becoming familiar with the things that do happen and can happen, so that we're less afraid. We're not putting up barriers between what is happening, what could happen, in that way. That we realize, hey, my zipper's been open a number of times, and nothing horrible happened really, and I've spilled wine on a white rug, and nothing horrible happened really, and that kind of thing. So that's also familiarity. That we're human beings, that we do these things, that they are. None of them is causing destruction to the world. None of these things that we do. Now, destruction to the world is another subject, and I don't mean that there aren't things that people do that are not destroying the world, but these things that we do that kind of destroy our own innate sense of worthiness are sometimes so infinitesimal that you might, like my friend, might have been up at night thinking about the drop on her sweater, for all I know. I mean, I don't need to project it. With the little time that we have remaining, what I'd like to do is come back to the meditation practice and say something about the third part of the practice, and we can just do it together. So let your body move, shift, find whatever position feels upright to you. You have long legs for these chairs, don't you? Yeah, yeah. It's great. So this is. And if I might, I want to invite you to just lean forward a little bit. In fact, scoot up on your, no, not the chair itself, but scoot yourself up a little bit. Good. Okay, great. Let's go from there. So briefly, as we've done, contact. Wherever you feel contact, feel it. Notice how it feels. Don't expect it to be how it was before, or that there's a special way it should be. Just notice what the sense of touch, texture, contact, feeling of clothes against the skin, the feeling of space in back, the back itself and what's behind, the sides of the body, and the walls that are the temporary borders of the room we're sitting in. The feeling of the face and the top of the head connected, it's imaginatively connected. And letting ourselves be just as we find ourselves. Not looking for any other way to be right now. Just being. And noticing our breathing, how it is, where it's moving. And then just placing our attention, our interest on the movement of the breath in and out. So body, breath, being breathed, together. Body and breath, sensation, whenever you notice some discomfort about something in your body or something in your mind, a thought, a sensation, acknowledge it. Don't push it away. Just notice that that's there. We suddenly have this sound of a fan blowing. And let it release itself into whatever it is. If it's a thought or a feeling, let it release itself into itself. It can be there. I'm still here. My breathing is still here. That's my vehicle for the practice, is that my breathing is there, whether I notice it or not, and I can always go back to noticing it. My limbs and the sides of my body are there all the time, whether I notice them or not, and I can always go back to noticing them. So my awareness of external or internal distractions or discomforts can bring me back to the mindfulness of being here. So as we're about to close the meditation session, I'd like to invite us all to just raise our gaze, raise our eyes, and just look out. Look out at the whole peripheral space around you. And ask yourself how the room feels, how you feel. We're not looking for any answers or right answers here. If you feel like you're hungry and you can't wait to get out of here, that's just fine. If you feel like you could sit here for another half an hour, that's just fine. If you feel like you'd like to hug someone across the room, that's fine. We're just being with whatever's here. Okay. So, I think my hope, and I think I've invited us to have an experience of meditation practice as we know it in the Shambhala Buddhist tradition, but also as I think most meditation practices in the old traditions of meditation practices have this in common, this sense of beginning with feeling oneself being present and appreciating that as the essence of who we are as human beings. And that we have a lot of work to do to accepting ourselves as human beings in the way we are. And that the pleasure of joining ourselves to meditation practice is joining ourselves to that quest, you could say, that pathway of that one, of the fan stopping. Or starting again, for that matter. So thank you, everyone, for being here. And Phoenix, thank you for inviting me and organizing this and getting ready to broadcast it.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, everyone.
I know I feel very different than before this class started, that's for sure, and I really needed it, so I'm so glad we had it. And I wanted to also thank Skylake Lodge and all the work that you're doing, and I know I left the flyer out on the table for the announcements as far as when you have free classes for the community. So
Yeah.
if we could mention that for folks
Sure.
watching this.
Yeah,
that
I
would
mean,
be really
I can mention it, and you could maybe also hold that up that flyer when you edit it. But it's basically there's free and open public meditation at Skylake Lodge. We have the director of Skylake Lodge here, and we have the practice and education coordinator of Skylake Lodge here. And Tuesday evenings from 6 to 7, Thursday evenings from 6 to 7, and Sundays from 10:30 to 12:30 with meditation instruction available at all those times. And go online and look up where Skylake Lodge is and what the activities are, and so you'll know how to get there.
Yeah, if you haven't been there, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And again, I thank you so much, and I wish you a very safe journey,
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
look forward to hearing about some of it when you get there.
Okay. All right.